Now we're starting chapter 1. Your marvelous mind, a growing machine. My fascination with the brain, how it develops in utero, and then in childhood. How it matures in early adulthood and then begins to shrink by midlife. How it shrivels in late life took root during my days as a student at Harvard Medical School. I have cherished memories of those days. As a student at Harvard Medical School, I have cherished memories of those days. Some, though, stand out vividly in my mind, like the day I first delivered a baby.
How do I do it?
It could have been just another day in the life of a medical student. Certainly, it started much like any other, with me waking before dawn, waking before dawn in my small Coolidge Corner apartment, bundling up against the frigid cold, and then setting out for my 2-mile bicycle commute through the snowy streets of Boston. My destination was the maternity ward at Beth Israel Medical Center. When I was midway through a 3-month obstetrics rotation as part of my basic clinical training. As I had every day for the prior 6 weeks, I would spend the next 12 hours attending to patients in various stages of labor, checking their progress, and answering their questions. A third-year medical student, I had already acquired a reasonable base of knowledge about the human body. Thanks to long days of lectures, followed by late nights cramming my brain with the details of everything from the biochemical process of sugar metabolism to cancer-causing cell mutations, to the biothesis of medicine. In my second year, I had completed a general surgery rotation, starting first as an observer and then slowly carrying out minor surgical tasks of increasing difficulty, learning by doing under close supervision. In my obstetrics rotation, I'd already observed as many as 200 deliveries and assisted in 20. I had started medical school with a deeper well of medical knowledge than the average student, at least when it came to brain-related matters, having taken the annual route of completing my PhD in neuroscience at Johns Hopkins University before I started medical school. I was actually in the MD program at Harvard by way of teaching scholarship offered through Harvard MIT Division of Health Sciences and Technology, which put me in the unlikely position of teaching neuroanatomy to my medical school classmates while I was a student myself. I knew neuroscience, but for medical conditions below the neck, I was in much the same position as my classmates. Nervous, but also eager to learn everything I could about the human body. So it was with equal parts uncertainty and excitement that I greeted my obstre- obs- ob- obstetrics professor as she sauntered over to me in the delivery room that day. Motioning to the 19-year-old woman who was nearing the final stages of labor, she said, "You'll deliver this one," turning an ordinary day into one I will never forget. Never. In the delivery room, I was gowned and gloved, and I'll admit, sweating profoundly as the baby began her trip down the birth canal. A new life was entering the world, and I didn't want to mess it up. Thankfully, everything went according to plan, and after the mother-to-be gave a few final pushes, I eased the baby into my hands. Now, this is an incredible moment, even after you've experienced it a few times. But I'll never forget the feeling I had sitting there amid the happy tears of the new mom and her family, and even a few of my own, holding that baby girl who would soon be named Sarah. Sarah. 9 months ago, she was a microscopic bundle of rapidly dividing cells. First 2, then 4, then 8, 16, and on unto trillions. How could she have grown into this bawling, squirming, perfectly formed human? Along the way, a million things could have gone wrong, and yet here she was, with eyes that one day would be able to distinguish several thousand shades of color, a complex auditory system capable of transforming vibration in the air into sound and turning those sounds into intelligible thoughts and concepts, and a heart that would beat some 100,000 times a day, every day. 100,000 times a day, every day. 1 year, having spent time training in the pediatric psychiatry, cardiology, and medicine wards, I was doing another rotation in my life as a medical student, this time in neuropathology, an elective whose choice reflected my fascination with the human brain. Neuropathology, the study of disease of the central nervous system, involves performing autopsies to detect disease in the brain, both by examining it first and with the naked eye and later under the microscope. And I was eager to jump in as I had been on my obstetrics rotation. I was grateful, too, to finally spend weeks focused on exploring the brains of patients who had Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, head trauma, and Alzheimer's disease. By comparing their brains to those of ordinary, healthy, elderly people who had died of natural causes, I knew I would gain a new understanding of the workings of the brain and how it changes it with aging and disease. Just as I had for the OB rotation, I progressed in steps. First watching someone else perform a brain autopsy, then inspecting an already prepared brain, and finally handling the delicate procedure of removing the brain from the skull. But unlike in obstetrics, neuropathology takes a place in a morgue, a cold, sterile room. Think bare walls, metal tables, and concrete floors, inevitably tucked away in the bowels of the hospital building. There's another big difference. In neuropathology, patients don't cry or squirm or come to harm if you make a wrong move.
Right.
Still, the brain can't be properly studied if it is handled roughly or, God forbid, dropped. And you only get one shot at successfully removing it from the skull.
Right.
My moment to perform a brain autopsy finally came one weekend morning with a call from the morgue. If you want to do this one, come in now. The professor I was working with said, I hopped on my bicycle, pedaled to the other Harvard Teaching Hospital, Massachusetts General Hospital, and quickly changed into my hospital scrubs. Awaiting me in the basement morgue was the body of an 85-year-old woman who had died of aspiration pneumonia and had suffered from dementia.
Yeah.
Her name was Miss Gray. By this point, I had enough cadavers and exposed brains that I was quite comfortable entering the morgue and preparing for my autopsy. Still, as I donned my protective gown, face mask, and hood, I felt nervous anticipation that wasn't too unlike those days in the delivery room.
Right.
To remove the brain from the skull, the coroner and I first had to cut away the top of the skull, just above the eyebrow, with the help of an electric saw. There is some delicacy needed. Slice too deeply, and I've destroyed the delicate gray matter within. Once the skull was cut, I set the bowl-like top piece aside and gently pulled the brain outward, making space to slice away its attachment to the spinal cord.
That's right.
I then eased Miss Gray's brain, cut and let it fall gently into my cupped hands. A brain has the consistency of jello, and like a baby, it is fragile and a little slippery. In a moment, I would weigh it, examine it visually, and then place it in the formalin-filled bucket to preserve and harden it so that it could be dissected and observed under the microscope. Even without a microscope, though, I could see the ravages of time. Instead of a plump peaks and minimal valleys of a young, lush brain, Miss Gray's had deep ridges separated by wide spaces. As I cradled Miss Gray's brain in my hands, I remember marveling in much the same way I had on the day Sarah was born. In my hands